I met Omar, just a little background, when he was 23 years old. I'm going to tell you how long ago that's been. But he was also doing gang mediation as a full-time employee in the Gainesville, Texas State Prison. And he was mediating as a full-time employee of the prison system. He was mediating gang disputes inside. And I have never heard of anybody, a full-time employee of the prison system, that could walk freely on the prison blocks, in and out of solitary. And he was doing this, and I said to him, if you can do that inside the prison, you can do it in this community. So we brought him out. He was on payroll for us for a year. We helped him set up his nonprofit. So he'll explain to you what happened from there. But Omar and his team, Omar Jawar from Dallas, Texas.
Well, thank you, Bob, for allowing us to be here again. It is a great privilege to come and share and hear. It's been great to just listen to so many great ideas and programs and people who I know. Some I don't know, but most of the leaders we've been knowing each other for years, so this is just affirmation. Sometimes when you're on the front line, you got to be reminded that you're not by yourself, and that this is not some war you're fighting with one weapon, but there are many people who are doing the same thing. So I'm very honored to be here. Let me say that, and I do acknowledge that y'all been here long enough, so I promise you we won't be long, because if you like me, you hungry just like I am, and I've been stealing cookies and stuff for the last hour, so I know my diet is off. But let me say this: we have some great people, and I want you to hear from them. Let me give just the premise of what we do. Bob is right. I met Bob many years ago. I was much smaller, and he was still looking like he looks. And I had a young man who was in prison. And he got released to go into D.C. He was kicked out of Louisiana. Our program is in Dallas, Texas. We were in Texas. He was in a Texas prison, but his family was in Louisiana. But they had signed a letter saying he could not return to Louisiana. So he was just really staying in prison just to find a place to go. And he found an aunt that he hadn't seen in a while, and she lived in D.C. And so, as God would have it, he went to D.C. and he got connected to a group called the Alliance for Concerned Men, a group that was doing work in the community. And he called me. He was so excited. He said, "Man, I found a dude that's doing the same thing you doing. The only difference between you and him is he old." I said, "All right, let me call him." So I called Bob and I challenged Bob because I was much younger, and at that point I was radical. And I said, "If you're doing all this work, won't you come down here to the prison and do it?" And he said, okay, which was surprising. So he came to the prison and did a book signing. He gave all the prisoners books. So it was just a wonderful experience. And we connected, and he told me the same thing. And basically what I found was that the people who are most needed are normally the less utilized as it relates to social services. The people that I've found have the answers. He was right. I enjoyed what you just said, but you were absolutely right. There's a void, and that void to me is those urban adults who make up the voices in the crowd, but they are normally not given the microphone because people are afraid of them or they don't understand. So they are the most needed, but they are the least utilized. So when I was in prison, I found that the whole culture was moving according to their thoughts, their ideas, their movements. And so what we did was try to find these brothers who could control the prison, and we did the same thing in the community. And we call it urban specialists. Long story short, we call it urban specialists. And what urban specialists means, it means those who can get closest to the client, those who know the nuances, those who know the ideas. And so I've been on the search. For the last 20 years of my life, I've literally been saying we must change the culture. We need a movement to change our culture. We don't need, I can create another program, and I can tell you about my program, and you can tell me about your program. But if there's not a movement, a cultural movement, what you have is silos and one-offs that feel good to us, but they don't put a dent in the problem. We need to have a movement that makes people wake up and they realize that a movement is there. Bob and I, we've talked about this ad nauseum, that the civil rights movement did not say every prejudiced person must stop being prejudiced. That wasn't the goal. Every lunch counter has to stop being prejudiced. You can't do that. But you can say the bigger goal is this movement says that this idea is not acceptable anymore. And when you say that idea is no longer acceptable, the iterations of that will ring down into the people that's trying to make the difference. So our goal is to figure out, how do we say what John Ponder is saying, that there's hope for prisoners, or what my man said, that there is hope in boxing, or if there's a Dre saying there's youth advisors, or Billy saying, how do we make this become a movement and not just a message? And so that's what we've been trying to do with this urban specialist idea. And I'm gonna say this before I introduce our brothers. Bob called me, and I don't know if he was spiritual or drunk, but it don't matter. It sounded right, whichever way it was. He sounded like he was spiritual, so he was happy. I know he was happy. I don't know what was making him happy, but it was something. But he called me. He said, "Man, I got an idea, man." I said, "All right, go ahead." And Bob said, he said, "Omar, it's cops, it's community, and it's our country." He said, we need to figure out how to make this movement to where the polarized idea of police against community, only Black Lives Matter, he's like, man, there has to be a way that we make this magnetize on a granular level so that young people and celebrities and business leaders and schools and churches and communities all say the same thing to where it becomes a brush fire. And I said, we good, we got it. And so that's what we've been thinking about since he said it. And so these guys that are with me are part of the group that I love because they've been with me a while. The newest member is Vito, but I'll tell you who they are, and then I'll just allow them to speak on their role in our urban specialist program. Vito, Gary Walker, he's been with us a few years because Vito was in prison for 21 years. But he was in prison for 21 years for a crime he did not commit. He was sentenced to prison when he was 16 years old. And when I met him through Anton. When Anton got out of prison, the first thing Anton told me is, don't forget my brother who is in prison, and he absolutely did not commit the crime. I said, we won't forget him. And so we've been working toward his exoneration. Everywhere we go, we tell the truth because we believe that truth don't give you a right to be ignorant. It sets you free. So this young man is not bitter. He is humble with us. He is compassionate with others. And he uses his life as a testament that you can go to hell, but you can come back. Mm-hmm. And so he's everywhere. We have, Vito is one of the guys that we use in our bus areas. In the bus areas, and that's in Dallas, there's some transit stations, West End transit stations that are very tough. And we send him right in the middle of that. And he is the kind of guy, I tell people, he can take the stem out of a lit dynamite and not blow up, because he is conscious of how to intervene. He's an interventionist. And so we've been training him, and he's been working that for a long time. And so I'll let him talk about who he is. But let me introduce Corey. Corey Cleghorn is not Creole. He's really white. This is a real white man. So I don't want y'all to think he white, for real white. Mama and dad are white. So we got a white guy who is, but Corey is the number one, he's the number one club promoter in Dallas. When I met him, he was promoting clubs, attracting 3,000 and 4,000 people every Sunday night to different clubs, and it's unbelievable. And a a lot of young people. He has an entertainment conglomerate called Clout World, and what he does is he throws parties. That's what he was doing before our iteration. Now, Anton, again, introduced me to him, but what happened was, and we knew each other just in passing, but one night, 2 young men that we love were killed at a club that he was promoting. He had done everything right to keep them alive, but the culture killed them anyway, and the bullets killed them anyway. And so I was so angry, Anton, I told him, let's find this guy. And we found out where he lived. And we drove to his house that night. And when we drove to his house, he had the DJ, he had everyone in, it was a compound, was kind of where he was at. And when we walked in, he was in the middle of the circle holding his head, just crying. And saying, I don't know how these boys died tonight. It was 2 young men, and as a matter of fact, Bob came down and Buster, and they helped me because I had to eulogize this young man. It was interesting because that's why I don't have a problem at all with police, because we had the Bloods, we had this, we had, it was a very hostile environment, and I was preaching and praying, and I had police in the corners because we said that we will not allow this to turn into a retaliatory idea. And so, but since that day, and that's been almost 10 years, Corey has been with me. I've mentored him. He has become our Pied Piper as to how to create social movements and how to really become involved in the work. And then Anton Lucky, who you'll hear from, is he, some people know him because he founded the Bloods in Dallas. He has been one of the guys who created the gang culture when we were dealing with it in the 90s and 2000s. But I know him beyond that. He's been with me almost 20 years now, and we've been everywhere around the world. He is one of the young men you can count on to give you truth. I really love him. He's like somebody that I can trust with my children because he has that kind of love in his heart. I never forget, Anton was one of the ones who we were trying to create a peace treaty. And this is a funny story. We was trying to create a peace treaty. And we had about 200 Bloods and Crips at this barbecue place, and to get, to talk it out. And this lady came from ABC News, and I don't think she knew how real it was because we was in there and these brothers was smoking weed for it. I was like, oh Lord, this ain't the right thing. And brothers pulling out weapons, and we were just nervous. And the lady told me, I want all you guys to scoot in so we can take a picture. I said, ma'am, you might not make it home tonight. You might want to relax and just get in the background. But it was a very, very volatile situation. But Anton put his life on the line for me. I had a meeting with all these OGs, these guys who were Crips, Bloods, dope dealers, all of them. And I met them at Boston Market. And Anton, when I met him, he was a kingpin. And I was trying to negotiate, asking them to come on, I need you to be a part of this movement. And the brothers was telling me how much money they made. We make 60,000. We make 100. They was really very, very negative. And Anton got up in the midst of his peers and said, "We are wrong, man. Y'all talking like we right. We wrong. All of us wrong. We killing children." And he tucked his chain in his deal and said, "I'm with him. I'm gonna roll with him." And he lost everything. He didn't. He had a whole lot of stuff. I said, "You're gonna lose all of that," because he had to come on our side. But even in the tough times, he's been the guy that I've counted on the most. And then someone who I just met who will speak to you guys from a different level is Chief Aziz, who is number 2. I'm hoping to get number 1, but anyway, he's the number 2 guy in the Dallas Police Department, and that's the truth. He is, for real, the deputy chief. But it was amazing. We didn't know at all that this was his uncle. Because Anton's father has been in prison for 37 years, who is his brother. And I said, "Why didn't you tell me that?" He said, "Because I ain't know." We had to reintroduce Anton and his father back together, which was amazing. And Anton kind of act like his dad is daddy, but that's another story. But he came out the other week because we do this since our shooting in Dallas. We do a meeting every Tuesday that Corey organizes, about 100 people, where we have the police and the community together, and we keep this dialogue going. And he got up, and Anton's dad was there, and it was so amazing. He looked at his brother and said, I know who you are. I know what we've been through, but I love you, man. And don't you ever think that this suit changes our blood. You my brother. It was, man, everybody in there was like, Lord, this was just a moment that you couldn't pay for. And so from that time, then I started learning what he did. I said, we got to get him in the movement. That's why I told Bob and Terrence we need him here. So this is the cadre who we have. And basically, the only thing I wanted you to know, that's a, kind of a 30,000-foot view, is that we believe transformation is possible. We believe it has to be a movement. But more than anything, we believe you got to have the right people kind of positioned right, and then we could do a lot of work in the community. So I want to start with Vito, and then we'll just keep going.
I want to thank y'all. I want to thank Bob and Pastor Omar and all of y'all for having me down here. I want to thank Bob and Pastor and a lot of y'all for sharing y'all wisdom with me. It really means a lot to me. When I was 15 years old, I was falsely accused of a murder, and then when I was 16, I was certified as an adult, and I was sentenced to 55 years in prison. When I was going to trial, I couldn't believe that they could send me to prison for something I didn't do. So I was naive. You can call it naive, because I really was like, they can't do this to me, because I didn't do it. And I really believed that. But as trial went on, and then when they were saying about the evidence is eyewitness testimony. And when they say evidence in the first place, I'm saying, what evidence? Because it's not me. So I'm always was thinking, I'm good. But as it went on, the table started turning. And then I ended up going to prison. When I was in prison, I was mad, I was angry, I was bitter, and I was real rebellious in the beginning. And God put good people in my life though. God kept my family with me, my mama, my sister, my brother. They loved me and they came to see me. They pleaded with me and knew my situation. But it came a time to where I had to stop being mad, and I had to stop being bitter and jealous and stuff, because I was looking at people living their lives that was my age, having kids and stuff, and I was saying, man, God, what did I do? Because I can't even have a normal life. And so I was dealing with that. So when I did put that bitterness and anger to the side, it's like God just started opening up doors. I was never a bad person. You got to understand, these folks, they put me in prison. They charged me with a crime I didn't commit. So they said I was this person that I'm not. Then they put me around people that's really murderers, people that's really drug dealers, killers, stealers, and all this. And I'm not them either. I can't adapt to be them. I'm still not them. So I ended up, while I'm incarcerated, Anton, he ended up getting locked up. And when he got locked up, we was talking, and I was telling him my situation, and he had heard a little bit about it when he was out in the street. So he ended up telling me that he was gonna help me. And man, the ball started. Once I stopped being mad and bitter, God started opening the doors, putting good people in my life, and things started transpiring. So I look at my life now, and kids ask me sometimes when I be on the bus, they say, "Mister, why you be helping us? Why you be doing the stuff you do?" And I say, because I want them to make it. I want them the same success I want for me. I want it for them. And then at the same time, you got to understand that a person that committed the crime they said I committed can't do what I do, what we do. They can't do this. And not only that, I do this because for the kids, because no money or nothing can get them years back. But if I could stop them from having to go through any of that stuff that I went through, I'm gonna get them years back. And I believe that. I really want to thank Bob though, and because Bob is, when I first met Bob, I heard a whole bunch of stuff about him, but from Anton and Pastor Omar and Claire, and man, Bob has wisdom, and he doesn't sell it to you, he gives it to you, for real, and I appreciate that, I really do, because that wisdom, that lets you know that the wisdom is real. Game is what's going on if they want you on the streets, and because they tell you, game is to be sold, not told. But wisdom, he gave it to me, he giving it to me, and I appreciate it, I really do. But
hi, my name is Corey Cleghorn. I'm an urban specialist, but I also am been blessed to be into marketing, and that's my God-given gift. And that has put me in the path to meet this gentleman, from which I know. I grew up in an area of Dallas called Oak Cliff. I got out in the wrong way and became a very big marijuana dealer, and went away for 4 years from marijuana, and got back out and got into the music business and doing club promotions, and came across Anton, we call him Bruce Wayne, and he would come to the events that we were doing, and I knew him from the streets, of seeing him in the streets before I had got locked up, and I just figured he was probably still hustling, because he still, looked like, one of the guys who were, and I figured what he used to do. So one day he came up to me and he said, man, I got somebody I need you to talk to. And I said, look, man, I don't hustle anymore at all. And he said, no, man, I don't either. And I said, okay, well, who is it? He said, this is Pastor. I said, Pastor? Well, I guess if he talks to you, he can talk to me too. He said, man, I'm telling you. So he told me his story, and then I had got on the phone with Pastor, and being as busy as everything is, I spoke to him probably about 6 to 8 weeks before the incident happened, where two of Anton's friends were killed at a club where I was at. And it got into me so bad that I did not want to promote anymore. The club that I was at, I had 6 police officers on the sidewalk that I paid myself to control the party. His friends that were there, they didn't fight inside the club. They were respectful. They left. They went around the corner, and 3 or 4 minutes later, we hear gunshots. So in my mind, I'm thinking, still, the music, what we're doing, I'm getting out of the business. So like they said, they came to my house at a point in time where I said, I'm through doing this. I'm not even doing hip-hop clubs anymore. I'm not, even though I knew that I put more care into the parties and had more control of the events than anybody else doing it. They came to me at that time and they said, basically, Pastor would show up to the clubs. He said, you got 3,000 or 4,000 people drinking on a Sunday night. Can you help me save some kids? And he had a big conference that was called the Solutions Conference. And at this time, I was going through a thing with one of the club owners, and it really, when I went in and I kept hearing solutions, be with me, I just said, I want to be a part of what you guys are doing. And this has been over 10 years ago, about 11 years ago, been with them every day. And just to make our stuff kind of short, I got an independent record label deal as something that did not have a movement or a mission behind it. We got a direct national recording deal. We do mobilize a lot of people. We've been working with Bob a long time, and we really know how to translate this and move the culture in different areas, and we really look forward to being able to do that with you guys and really create something that can change the culture, because we know how to do it. And we thank you guys for the stories and the collaboration as well.
How you all doing? I'm Anton Lucky, and first and foremost, I want to applaud all of my colleagues around the country who do this work. It's always refreshing to see you guys in these kind of atmospheres, kind of events. First, I want to say, God told me to go to jail so I can help Vito, so I didn't do nothing wrong. God told me to. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I want to say this, and I don't want to go too in depth on me, and because my story is just like everybody else's story. But one of the things I did do when I went to prison that I don't think most people probably don't do. But one thing I did do, and yes, my father was sentenced to 50 years when I was 9 months. I didn't meet him till I was 25, maybe 26, somewhere up in there. And he did 37 years. But one thing I did, and I don't use this as no excuse, but one thing I did do while I was in prison, I accepted responsibility for everything that led me to that point. I accepted that responsibility. I did some introspective thinking. I traced my life back, and I concluded that everything that I'd done to that point, I made a conscious decision to do. And so I had to make amends with myself in terms of a part of my, getting myself back together is accepting. I didn't use no excuse. I didn't use my neighborhood. I didn't use the fact that my father went in the household, because I had grandparents who taught me right from wrong. And so I knew right from wrong. I was an A honor roll student. And so being in the court and standing in front of the judge, and he said to me that I was a menace to society, that really shook me, because I looked back. I thought somebody else was in the court getting sentenced with me. And so that's right then I began to really trace my life back. But when I got to prison, I took responsibility. Fast forward to getting out. As Omar said, he did meet with me when I got out. I was staying in an exclusive neighborhood. It was the year 2000. I had a 2000 Corvette, Range Rover, Land Cruiser, and a nice Cadillac, of which he talked me out of. Yeah, he talked me out of it. Pastor got my Cadillac.
Told him he need to pay a tithe.
But I did give it all up, and he bought me an old station wagon. I started from old station wagon, man. I started from ground up doing this work, and fast forward into now, and the reason why we here, law enforcement and community, as y'all know, and I'm quite sure my uncle gonna speak more to this. But as y'all know, back in July 7th, prior to that, with Philando Castile and Alton Sterling, and then what happened in Dallas with those 5 officers, which was horrific and a trying time for our city, we began at the Urban Specialist to conduct conversations. We jumped right into that fray. The day after the shooting, we invited the activists who put on the rallies along with police officers, man, and it was a real conversation, because we believe that we gotta have these conversations with law enforcement and community. And I think as we look at the national trend now, is this conversation about the police brutality, and this conversation about what's going on with police. And so what we've been doing is trying to have these conversations in a manner that we say, what is valid on this side? What's valid? See, because you can't have this conversation about law enforcement and community without really seriously listening to and hearing the opposing views. You got to do that. It's a whole bunch of single mothers who are really fearing for their kids' life. And that's a real reality. And then you have police officers, good police officers, who are really trying to do their job, but they are being met with hostility because of this national narrative that's being drawn. And so for us, with the Urban Specialist movement, what we've been trying to do is have those conversations, bring those officers and community and activists in the same space and say, what's valid on your part? and what's valid on this part, because I think we can all agree that we all want a safer city, a safer nation for our kids. But what's been happening is that we become staunched in our position. You know, we become staunch in our position one way or the other, and no one is listening to each other. And so what we're trying to do is have the communities come together and listen. So we want to say to the Black Lives Matter movement who are addressing police brutality and say, this is right. We want to take the validity of their feelings and match it with the right course of action and say, no, we cannot be violent. We cannot respond to violence. But we also want to say to police officers that you have to look at this in a different, you have to be real particular. Don't be parochial in your view when you engaging with community. And I'd like to use an example. When we had the activists in the room together, it was an officer, she was a sarge, black lady, and these activists were going in. They was going in. And I said, this lady right here, because we're talking about the national conversation, I said, this lady right here became a police officer because she wanted to protect and serve her own community. I said, that's why she became, without even asking her that. I said, that's why she became. I said, and now, with the national discourse that's going on now, every time this sister come to her community, she is met with hostility because we have this narrative that says all police officers are bad, which is not good for our community. I said, so put yourself in this lady position. Put yourself in her shoes who are trying to take care of her family, but every time she come to the community in which she's trying to serve, she is met with hostility. I said, put yourself in the shoes of that white officer who really has a heart for the community and trying to help the community, but because of this narrative that we have, that officer is being met that he a racist or he prejudiced and this and that there. That is dangerous for our country. And so for what we're doing, I'm gonna wrap up. So what we're doing, we're trying to have these discourses all across the country, all across the world, where we having officers and activists in the same space. I don't think it's you over here and you over there and it's polarized. I don't think that's the way we should go. I think we should invite them in and say, let's have a conversation, because one of the main activists in our city, she worked for us now. She was out there. She worked for us now because when we recruited her in, we just had conversations. We didn't tell her we didn't proselytize her. We didn't tell her she was wrong. We just listened to her. And as we started having these conversations, she started realizing on her own the fallacies in her thought. She started realizing that. And so that's what we want to do, and that's what we're here for. We have to get out of the mindset that we can't listen to the other side. It's okay for somebody to have a different opposing view than you. And if that view makes you angry or frustrated or to the point that you want to commit violence, then you got the weaker view. You has the weaker view. And so I'm gonna end on this. I want to say this. I want to say this.
Pastor Lucky.
Okay. I want to say this.
Pastor Lucky, we got to.
I got hope. I got hope because the other day I got a 3-year-old niece. My 3-year-old niece said to me, "Uncle, I want to be a police officer," without provocation. She just said that to me, and I caught that so quick and said, we gotta stand up for those kids.
It's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Chief.
We're hired. Let me try to marry some things together with myself. First, I'm honored to be a part of this, and then thanks, Pastor and Anton, for inviting me and making me a part of your group. It's am I speaking loud enough now? I usually can get very aggressive. I don't really. Okay, I'm trying to tone it down. Yeah. So thanks for inviting me and having me be a part of the Urban Specialists. It's important work, and it's important to me, and it means the world to me. And I'll tell you where I come from. Oak Cliff, Texas, in the neighborhood, and then all of a sudden, at some point, I needed a job. And what did I do? I went and joined the sheriff's department because I could be a detention officer. Well, half my family was already in there. It didn't really matter. So might as well go in there and join them. That was easy work. And I get down there, and then so a guy says, "Hey, man, you're too smart to be working right here. You need to go join Dallas Police. You have a degree or something, don't you? You ain't been to college? Yeah, I do have some college. You know, so go join the Dallas Police. I said, well, I really don't want to just join for the money. And then what he just said was so important. He said, well, what can you do? Well, I made it out. I was one of the fortunate guys who could have went the other way. I could have been either way. I was going either way. It didn't matter. Something was going to happen because I was going to make a decision. So what decision was I going to make? I just happened to take the right course of action. My future wife was then pregnant with my son, so I had to get a job, and I did. And I joined the Dallas Police Department because a guy told me I was one of the smart guys. Get out of here. So I said, well, I can help some people. So I went down there and I wrote on the application the reason why, a long paragraph, and they was really grading you on grammar, not really why you wanted to be there. Yeah. And I just said, I really want to help the community where I came from. Now, that means very little when we deal with police officers now. We ask them, you know, do they remember what they said when they wanted to be a police officer? And 99% has nothing to do with pay. It has something to do with, I want to help the people in the community. It doesn't say money. It doesn't say I want power with a badge. I want to hold the gun. It doesn't say that. It say I want to help the people in my community. And I was no different. That's the first line that I wrote, that I wanted to help people in my community. And I became part of a specialized crime unit where I chased some people around and put a lot of people in jail. I put a lot of people in jail. You know, this is no joke because I was very familiar with him. And I didn't know that was my nephew until a very short time ago. Okay? Gangs were really going up in Dallas and drugs were too, and I was chasing both of them and making a name for myself in the neighborhoods in Oak Cliff, in South Oak Cliff, and Northeast, and being called upon because we knew people. And then I started rising up the ranks, and then something attracted me to a group called the Black Police Association. And what attracted me there was not that it was a black group. It attracted me because in their vision, mission statement, they said, we wanted to be the conscience of the criminal justice system, and we wanted to bridge the gap between the police and the community. It had nothing to do with labor and employment rights or anything like that. It had everything to do with black police in the community. So we found ourselves in the community giving away backpacks on school and school supplies and turkeys on Thanksgiving and Christmas and all those things that many of us that came from the neighborhoods, we were trying to give back and say we didn't want kids where we come from to take a different path and take a path that we can be productive in society. That's where we were. And it attracted me to it. It attracted me so much that I became the local president right after that. Yeah. And then I found myself on a regional level. And I was the regional president. And then I was the national chairman of the National Black Police Association and representing the voice for 100,000 black police in this nation. And their mission was, because we got some history here, because he knows what I'm talking about. Bob knows what I'm saying. For 44 years, they talked about bridging the gap between police and community, not about labor and employment rights and things that you can fight for officers, but it was always about how do we stamp out police brutality, how do we control handguns, how do we control narcotics in our neighborhood, how do we establish community policing. All of these things were adverse, totally anti-police rhetoric. The black police in 1972 were talking about these issues as far back as 44 years ago, talking about bridging the gap in the community. So it attracted me. And so I was still rising up the ranks, sergeant and lieutenant and deputy chief, one of the fastest promoting deputy chiefs in the history of Dallas. But when I speak and I talk this language, that language was almost against what some of my colleagues were saying because it was about labor and employment rights. It wasn't about us establishing a relationship in the community where we were talking about teaching kids how to read, to stop building prison beds. By the time they were in the 4th grade, the youth became important to us. And even when, and I was sharing this even with Pastor Omar when I was speaking, that even when I used to take young guys to jail, they probably got mad at me a many days because I would be preaching on my way. If I took them, if I may have taken them home, I may have given them the opportunity that we didn't have, that I was going to tell their mom or dad or whoever was there, uncle, grandmother, he ain't doing right. And you need to get him because I only got one place to go with him. This is what we do. Help do something with him. Do something. I'll help you as much as I can. And if I didn't have that choice, when on my way down to Lou Sterrett Justice Center, I said, you got to get your life right. You got to do these things right here. You got to get straight. And I'll tell you this story before I pass it over. I know we got many people to hear. One time, East Oak Cliff in a very bad neighborhood, and I was messing with some drug dealers, and I was always after this one guy, trying to get him right. And he was a really bad guy. It wasn't Anton at this time, though. And so when I got him one day, me and my partner, and he was rolling, and I got him, and I said, man, what you got in there? He says, man, I got some stuff in the front seat. And I said, all right, you know we're going to have to go today. I told you about this right here. How many warnings I'm going to have to give you? I take him down, and I give him my preaching lesson all the way to jail. And then he had the Uzis now. He had the Uzi machines up in his front, and he had plenty of dope. And he was rolling, this gangster, serious gangster. But when I took him there and he got out, years later I was working an off-duty job, and I'm standing there, and a guy comes up, and he says, you look familiar. And I said, what you mean? And he tells me, I know you, and you took me to jail. And I said, really? And I said, what do you have? And I'm thinking a confrontation is about to go down. And he says, I just want to hug you. And he had a little girl with him. She was 3 years old. And he said, he hugged me. I'm in full uniform. And he grabs me and he hugs me and he says, thank you. He said, you talking to me on my way down, and I told you my girlfriend was pregnant. And this is my daughter right here. Without you saying those words to me, it finally hit home. He said, man, I would have been dead, or there's no telling where I would have been. And that right there, for police, if you don't think we have police who care and who want to do something in the communities and who don't want the community to go in another way, this is why men like this exist. This is why I exist. So my vernacular is very different from where I came from. Because I came from boys clubs and girls clubs, boys and girls clubs with recreation centers and food trucks coming and housing communities and all those those things are not foreign to me. I was a part of it. It's a part of who I am. I go home every night, I take off a uniform and I'm blue, and then there's no miracles that happen. My skin is still black. That I still live in this world. And on 7/7 of 2016, that's why they was out there pressing in the neighborhoods, because these well-known people in Dallas, Texas, well-known. Everybody knows them. There's not a cop who don't know them. There's not a cop who doesn't know them. So there we are, 5 officers being killed, and the world is changing. And there I am on the national circuit, even invited to the White House to meet with the president. And one thing that he wanted to say when he gave his speech, he said, I want to say what Malik Aziz said, that there's no us against them, it's only us. And that's what it is. It's only us. And that's where I like to stay, keep it at, with it's us. There's no police versus the community. There's no community versus the police. It's only us. And we're going to have to deal with the solutions together, because we already know the problems. A math teacher told me one time when I was doing bad at math, she said, you spend too much time on the problem. You need to work on the solution.
This is, any questions from the audience before we wrap up? This has been powerful. I tell you, I would like to ask each of you if you had to make 1 or 2 recommendations as to how we can improve the relationship between community and police, what would it be? Starting with Vito.
It'll have to be trust. It'll have to be trust. It'll have to be building a relationship on trust, because of that. And the relationship on trust, and to be able to like Anton say, to hear your opinion, because even if you saying this white man or that black man, that don't make you no racist. That make you a person. That's understanding that we all people. And so I believe that it has to begin with trust, because that's the big issue in our neighborhood. What I see with the kids, what they say, the police think we dumb. That's their opinion, but it's our job to bring it back around in a circle for them, to let them know that, hey, we equal. They don't think you dumb. You just gotta stay. You gotta be the leader. You got the ability to lead. That's you as a leader.
So you've got to be the intermediary between the community and the police.
Yes, sir.
Anton?
I think we have to have honest, serious dialogue constantly with officers and community. And I think the guidelines got to be that, you know, we coming in trying to learn from each other, you know, not trying to promote our position, you know, because I think when we have those conversations, it'll break down the barriers itself. Right now, I just think the conversations are not happening, or the conversations are not honest enough. You know, it got to be just bare fact, honest conversations that's happening. You know, because I think, you know, we all want the same thing, but we not having a conversation because we all stuck. It's a social media world, and when we constantly see videos of officers getting attacked, of people in communities getting attacked, you know, whether we understand it or not, it does something to our psyche. You know, as normal people, it does something to us. It creates some kind of perception. And so we got to continuously challenge what we see, that perception that can be cemented and turned into a stereotype. So I think these conversations got to just happen regularly.
Good. Omar?
Well, I think that just a specific recommendation, I think Pastor Darrell has a great idea with these men, the boot camp, the men. I think because of the obvious lack of male presence in the neighborhoods that we serve, I believe we should marshal police to say, we're gonna do a roundup, and it's not a warrant roundup. It's gonna be just a men roundup that's called by the police and communities and preachers. And you're gonna get in the car and you're not gonna get arrested. But we're gonna round you up, and we're gonna have, because there has to be a point where we start saying the same thing, that I need you, you need me. I think our brother said it earlier. He said too many of our enforcement see themselves as occupiers. And I agree with that. And when you see yourself as a partner and as a person that's connected to the problem, and someone else says, you said, Chief just said it, the man who was going to prison with Uzis and guns and dope, triggered because he said, what about your daughter, man? What about your girlfriend that's pregnant? I think there's a conversation that we could have about getting these men and the police just to do intentional connection. I don't know how we do that.
Between police and community. Know that? Corey?
I think we're starting a good communication with what we're doing with the police, as far as being able to go and partner with the police and then bring a bunch of resources to a community. I think that's one thing. I think it's patience, it's persistence, and it's also, you know, letting it come back to a person and not look at a whole system versus.
Explain what you're doing.
So what we're doing is, Pastor reached out to the chief right after the events, and we got together with the communications department of the police, and we came up with a community coalition. So what we've done is we've worked with the activists. Anton has brought a lot of the activist side together because they know that we have the credibility with them to, you know, if the police are wrong, then we're going to hold the police accountable. If the community is wrong, we're going to hold the community accountable. But the dialogue is there, and then we decided that the best way to come into the communities and introduce it is, let's bring in, you know, every nonprofit, every, you know, just goodwill person that we can, and we've put together 65, a little over 65 right now, organizations to be able to go into a community. And some are bringing tennis shoes, some are bringing free eyeglasses, some are just a whole plethora of things that we bring into the community. And we just had one last night where the police showed up, the fire department showed up, and they went into one of the top apartments called Rosemonts, that they have a nice set of apartments, but they're in almost every, you know, rough neighborhood, and just a coalition to really come in as solutions rather than always magnifying problems.
And let me say this on that, Bob, real quick. What he is saying, so y'all can really get it, is once a month. It was twice a month. Now it's once a month. The police The police are the conveners. We convene it, but we make the police as the ones who are bringing all of us together. His sister named Jolie, who is wonderful. And we bring in all kinds of services, business leaders, entrepreneurs, activists, OGs, church folk, everybody, educators. We bring them all together, and for an hour they share, and they share through the police portal. So the police now appears as a healer, not as a divider, because they lead the meeting. We sit down and say it's the police meeting. Even though we using our context and our Rolodex, we shift all of that power to the police and say now, so it's hard to vilify who you know. See, it's hard to make the police the villain when you were just sitting down with them. And they bringing you resources. So we do that once a month, and that's a powerful thing. And we have about 65 different groups that have signed up, and they come every month, and they just share, and it becomes just one thing.
That's great. Chief?
I would add on that in a very basic way. I'll say this word, community, and inside community is unity. And so from this police perspective and how we're in the fifth area or phase of reform from the 70s of blacks in policing, black chiefs in policing was a major reform with city government mayors. 1992 with Rodney King ushered in community policing on its second stage. Militarization happened in 97 in West Hollywood. 9/11, the biggest terrorist event that happened in the States. And then post Michael Brown, Eric Garner, re-ushering in community policing, which had taken a back step to the terrorist acts of 9/11. And that community focus, the unity in the community, was lost until now, until we witness a Philando Castile or Alan Sterling or Walter Scott, or you name the names in what has happened with police community relations based upon some police brutality. And I've always said when we talk about that community and unity, Sir Robert Peel said in British policing that the police are the community and the community are the police. And we can't ever forget that even in the fabric of our communities, the people who wear blue are supposed to be a part of that community, whether they're living there or working there. And we have, I like to say not police force or law enforcement, I like to call it, as they do abroad, a police service. And when we start thinking about it in a police
That's
service
another way of saying
attitude,
it.
then we don't think about law enforcement, oppression in the
what we
neighborhood,
need to call it,
coming
police
down,
service.
making a police state in neighborhoods that don't know how they got there from, people just come up in a cycle. So I like to get into that police service and embrace that community, that unity in the community, and that way we can break down the barriers.
And Chief, you're so right. This is the last statement I know because everybody hungry now. But me too. But let me just say this last thing. Bob, and please hear me on this. We have to become emotionally right when it comes down to what's going on in our community. This is what I mean. You are right. Every person in here needs pictures of those babies.
That's right.
I'm serious, man. We have to get outraged about the right stuff. And there's no better person to give us the right to say this is an emotional issue than a police who can say, see, he's a different type, Chief Aziz and this prosecutor and these other, this brother here. We gotta remember that, man. We can't get so caught up in, like Anton said, the social dialogue, that we forget that. Every time I see Corey, if I get out of my way, I go back to man and Courtney was killed, and we made a commitment to change the culture. When I get mad at Vito, and I get mad at him, trust me. But when I get mad at Vito, I remember this boy was in there for 20-some years for something he did not do. You got to keep your proper rage right so we can have the proper strategies. When we get off, we mess up. So I just want to make sure we remember that. Somebody right there.
What? Yes, go ahead.
I just had something real quick. And first of all, hats off to you brothers doing a great job. But I want to add to that, not only do the unity, but we need the accountability and the responsibility. And what I mean by that is that we've got to challenge people that are in key positions We need to challenge their motives for what they're doing and why they do it. And if they're misrepresenting us, the unity piece, in other words, why are we voting somebody in who's not on our team? Why are we supporting that individual? Why are we deflecting the situation over to propaganda when those kids are suffering? And in Indianapolis, even in the clergy part, you know, they strategically place clergymen who they can buy off to make the representation. And I'm always telling them that preacher does not represent the black community as a whole. And so what I'm saying is we have to have that responsibility piece, and that takes all of us in this room today to check our motives of what we're doing and why we're doing it. We can't fall in love with the grant. It's got to be for the right reasons.
What is going to happen, we're going to have dinner at 6, right next door. And also what we want to do tomorrow when we assemble, John, what time do we leave here? We leave here at 7:30. At 7:30, to board a bus to go to the police headquarters for the Friday event. And we're going to take about an hour, and I'm going to ask each of the segments, to take a 10-minute summary to a larger group of people tomorrow. I want to summarize just what we concluded here. And then we're going to hear a full presentation of John Ponder's program. And then we're going to have a graduation ceremony where you will see hundreds of ex-offenders and police sitting side by side. And that's going to, but I also need your help in taking the 3C movement, writing songs about it. Maybe we ought to go from city to city and have the kind of gathering that we have in Dallas, kind of a police community boot camp. And maybe we ought to pick some cities and just go there one by one, because all we have black folks doing now is demonstrating. Well, we need to go there and celebrate, but also we need to take the pictures of these babies to say our goal is to stop this. That's our goal. What'd you say?
Also, Bob, I think we talked about it this morning. I think one of the key ingredients to this movement is what you said this morning, that we have to adopt that we are against lawlessness, whether it's from the community or people in uniform.
It is
that's gotta be
cops
key.
and community
Yeah.
allied against lawlessness.
Right.
Whether that lawlessness is on the part of the police or the community.
Right.
We are against lawlessness.
Right.
We also want to reaffirm that when an incident does occur, there should always be the presumption of innocence
Right.
and let the justice system do what it does. That's what we've got to return to, and stop letting anarchists hijack our community. So on that note, I want to thank everybody for your coming, and also our guests from out of town, and we'll have dinner. Okay? John, you want to say anything, or just, all right? Let's eat.